Okay, you've worked through all the videos and you've done all the exercises. You can give yourself a pat on the back for all the hard work you've done on the reading and use of English paper. Seriously, well done, fantastic. But before you practice your timing in a full test in lesson 28, let's see what you know now about this part of the exam. We'll start with a couple of easy questions for you. How many parts are there in the reading and use of English paper? How long is it? How much time do you have to do all of the different parts? Well done if you remember that there are 7 parts and that you have 1 hour and 15 minutes to complete everything. But what are those 7 parts? Do you remember the different task types that make up this part of the exam? And what do you have to do in each part? The multiple choice close is the first part. You need to read a text and then choose the best word from 4 options in order to complete 8 gaps. In part 2, the open close, you have 8 gaps in a text and you have no options, no choices. You write one word that fits each gap, and the focus is more on grammar in this part. Part 3 is called word formation. You read a text and then change 8 root words to fit the text in the correct form. In part 4, that's the key word transformation exercise. You complete 6 separate sentences using 2 to 5 words and a given word that you must not change. Moving on to part 5, this is the first part with a lot of text to read. You read the text and then you answer 6 multiple choice questions. In part 6, you read a gapped text. You read a text that has 6 sentences removed from it, and your job is to put those 6 sentences back into the text, obviously in the correct place, and there's 1 extra sentence that you don't use. And the final task, part 7, is the multiple matching. You read short texts and then you match 10 questions or prompts to those texts. Do you remember how much time you should spend on each of the 7 parts? Well, you have 1 hour and 15 minutes in total, and there are 7 tasks to do. So how should you divide your time? You have to decide this, because nobody's going to tell you when to move from one part to the next part. This is one suggestion, but you need to practice yourself under timed conditions to see what works best for you. Because maybe you can do some parts quicker than others. Parts 1, 2, 3 and 4 are shorter exercises with fewer words. They're based on grammar and vocabulary more than reading comprehension. So for that reason, I suggest that you spend about 7 or maybe 8 minutes on the first 4 parts, because 8 minutes times 4 is 32, so that's about 32 minutes for parts 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now in parts 5, 6 and 7 you have a lot more text to read. So if I were you, I would spend about 12 minutes on each part, more or less 12 minutes. So 3 times 12 is 36. 32 plus 36 is 1 hour and 8 minutes. That leaves you with 7 minutes extra to check that you've answered every question, answer maybe any difficult questions that you want to go back to. And also remember, you need to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. So you need some time for that. Don't forget that you do not have to do the parts in order. You could begin with part 7 and then work back to part 1. Why not start with the longer, more difficult texts at the beginning of the exam when you're fresh, and then work from part 7 to part 1 where the texts get shorter in parts 1, 2, 3 and 4. So I would suggest that. I would suggest beginning with part 7 and working back to the shorter texts. You decide how to manage your time, and you decide the order that you do the tasks in. Here's another question for you. What percentage of the total exam is the reading and use of English paper? In the summary of the listening test, we said the listening is worth 20% of the total marks. And remember, you need to get 60% or more in total to pass the B2 first exam. So what percentage is the reading and use of English? What is this part worth? It's worth 40% of the total exam. The listening is 20%, the speaking is 20%, and the writing is 20%. That's 100%. So you need 60% overall to get a grade C and pass the exam. Obviously, you want to get as many marks as possible from every part of the exam. So which of these 7 tasks in the reading and use of English do you find most difficult? Is it part 2, the open close, where you write a grammar word in each gap? Or maybe it's the key word transformations in part 4, where you have to write between 2 and 5 words in the second sentence. Or maybe it's part 6, the reading, the gapped text, where you put sentences back in the text. Whatever part or parts you find difficult, those are the areas you need to focus on. Those are the parts you need to practice and improve before you take the exam. Because if you improve your weak parts, you'll get a higher mark in general, and you'll have a better chance of passing with a good grade. To summarize, check that your spelling is correct and that your writing is clear and easy to read if you decide to take the written exam and use a pen instead of the computer. Parts 4, 5 and 6 are worth more marks than the other parts. They're worth a maximum of 2 marks per question. So it might be worth allowing just a little more time on those parts, because each question is worth more. Guess unknown words from the context. Ask yourself if you're reading a verb, a noun, an adjective or an adverb, and try to guess from the words around it what the meaning is. Also, if there is a question you don't know the answer to, guess. Leave no box empty on your answer sheet. Always read a text quickly once and then go back and read it more slowly. underline or highlight key parts of the text and the questions. And when you find an answer in the text, justify it. Do more general reading. Read books, news, read blog posts, comics, film and product reviews, read about sports if you enjoy sports, read song lyrics, travel information. Anything and everything in English is good practice, good preparation for the exam. Reading extensively, frequently, is one of the best ways to improve your performance in this part of the exam. Of course, you'll learn more English if you enjoy what you're reading. And don't stop to look up and check every difficult word. This will spoil and ruin your enjoyment. Try to read past difficult vocabulary and enjoy what you're reading. You can always go back when you've finished reading and make a note of any interesting words and expressions that you want to remember. Now let's see what you remember from this lesson. Take the quiz and check your answers. In the next lesson, there's a general overview and summary of the writing part of the exam. Do you remember the different writing styles you should use to answer the 5 possible options in part 2? And what are the 4 criteria areas that your writing is marked on? Don't worry if you need reminding. We're going to revisit all that next lesson, and I'll give you some final tips and advice about how to answer the writing questions. So I'll see you in the next video.